to what is shared. Okay, so I am admitting the last few people, Dr. Rodriguez, and then I will pull up your PowerPoint and we can get started. Is there any questions before we get started? I have not mentioned the continuing competency hour, but for those of you that attend, you will get an hour of continuing competency that can go towards renewal if you are certified with us. And it will come out to you in the next few days. Okay.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Margaret. I'm just Quilvio, or you can call me Q. But you're gonna start the first slide. When I was a new nurse in the field, going for my associates, we would have people present, and they always ended up having some alphabet soup next to their name, all these letters. And I just always remember telling myself at that time, I was like, oh, wow, what would I have to do to get all that alphabet soup after my name? But I found out. I'm here with you. I'm just excited to have that alphabet soup after my name, but you can just call me Q or Quilvio. Margaret, are you able to put in the PowerPoint?
Am I able to put in the what?
The PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at it. You're not. Hold on a minute.
Thank you
I was
so
enjoying
much.
it. I was you bet. I was enjoying it, and I thought I had it pulled up. Just a minute, because I have it on my. Sorry, everyone. I had it on my screen, and I thought you could see it. All right, you cannot see this, Q?
Not yet.
Okay. That's what I'm doing. And now I know what happened.
Well, while you're setting it up, you can continue to set it up while I start guiding us in a quick meditation and mindfulness exercise. Is that okay?
Please, please, just ignore me.
All right, all right, everyone. Yeah. Okay. So feel free to get into a comfortable position. You can either close your eyes or look down, whatever you feel comfortable with. Take a deep breath in and breathe out fully. Busy people, busy bodies, busy minds. If only for a moment we can try to transition to relaxing people, relaxing bodies, relaxing mind. Imagine crisp, clean waters of a river of relaxation. This river of relaxation that flows through you from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, allowing you to become relaxed and renewed. Bring your attention to your toes and feet. This river of relaxation soothes all the muscles of the tendons of your toes and feet. This sense of comfort, this flow of water from the river of relaxation flows further upward, relieving the ankles and calves, softening the knees and thighs. Allow your legs to feel like they're just melting on your chair or seat. This river of relaxation continues to flow upward now, opening the hips, anticipating any tension in the belly. Soften your belly, soften your breathing, and imagine a gentle massage of the heart center. This relaxing river comes to your shoulders, imagining a heavy burden being lifted off your shoulders, allowing you to feel lighter and freer, more and more deeply relaxed. This crisp water flows down the arms and your fingertips. Now soften the muscles of the face, relieving any tension here. You are calm and relaxed, more and more deeply relaxed. Nothing you have to do, nowhere you have to go. Now imagine yourself floating on this river of relaxation with your whole body gently supported. You are supported. Just float and enjoy. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in that practice, setting the stage for our conversation tonight. Next slide, please. My presentation is on minimizing the stigma associated with seeking mental health services. And it's important to have some definitions, as I discovered in my holistic nursing training, with a lot of terminology that was new to me. So I just want to make sure we're kind of either speaking the same language or having an understanding of what we're going to talk about tonight. I went through the evidence and the research, and I kind of was looking for something that I could jive with. So stigma, a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person, tends to have kind of a negative connotation. And then stigmata, which is probably what more people are aware of, is the plural version, which is more than one mark. Stigmata, which is in reference to the bodily marks or pains resembling the wounds of the crucified Jesus. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary 2021, things change, information changes, but just putting that out there. And marginalized communities. They are those excluded from mainstream social, economic, educational, and/or cultural life. Some examples of marginalized populations include, but are not limited to, groups excluded due to race, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, physical ability, language, and/or immigration status. Marginalization occurs due to unequal power relationships between social groups. And this is coming from a 2020 research paper on long COVID in marginalized populations and how it's been managed. So even though that's on the medical side and I'm on the mental health side, I'm still reading from different journals here and there. I'm not discriminating on my educational things. So we're going to focus on the stigma. What are these kind of potential negative connotations of actually looking for help, asking for services? So while I was coming up with this presentation, I decided to write a poem because that's kind of a way for me to express myself through writing. And I'm going to read that poem with you. Next slide. Marginalized. Like the margins on a page in a textbook, the marginalized indicate the emptiness on the page, the seen but not read space in society, the context, not the content, the frame for the written, invited yet disregarded, often seen and quickly forgotten. But as a kid, I remember this differently. The margin was my creative place for doodling or writing down the names of a seasonal crush, for notes and definitions on highlighted material, hearts, stars, and flower images drawn in states of boredom, tic-tac-toe battles for the championship. The margin is what we make it. Chocolate chip relationships. And that's an homage to my favorite cookie. And I got a little emotional there, but being marginalized is hard. It's difficult to know your place in society, in your community, in your neighborhood, when sometimes you're not allowed to fully participate in that society. So I wonder, What can we do with this power that we have being on the outside? For you to ponder. Next slide. When do you ask for help? Where do you go? Where do you feel welcome? Or do you feel welcome? So this is when I will ask people that are compelled to speak to kind of resonate with these questions and what this kind of means to you, or if the poem touched anything about your lived experience. Do you understand or have an idea of what it's like to be on the margin, on the outside, not fully able to participate? Anyone that's compelled to speak.
See what you're doing.
So, Q, I'm wondering if it would help to stop the share for a moment so people can see each other, if that might make us feel more connected. Is that okay with you? I see you nodding yes.
Definitely, definitely. Okay.
So we welcome any comments about some of the things that Q has said so far about feeling marginalized from, or looking from the outside in or the inside out.
Do we have to raise our hands?
No, just speak.
Something I would say about feeling marginalized. I am from the Caribbean, so I am an outsider. I am Black, so I live in a community where it's primarily Caucasian. So I have always been the underdog looking out for other people. So because I know what that feels like to not fit in. And honestly, without all those statistics, I feel as though I never even fit in my own family. I always felt like the odd one out. So your poem really resonated with me, and I thank you for sharing.
Was there anything particular that kind of stood out for you, Casey? I'm from the Dominican Republic, so I'm from the Caribbean too, and I'm very excited to see some Caribbean people here, but everyone's always welcome too, but excited to see some Caribbean people here. Was there anything that kind of pointed out to you, Casey?
Yes, I actually wrote it down. You said invited yet disregarded, context yet not content. I just wrote those things down because it's something that it's not said, it's felt. Where it's not done purposefully, but yet still you still feel invisible, not part of the group.
Q, you're muted. You might want to unmute because,
I just say thank you.
okay.
Anyone else feel compelled to speak?
Someone spoke from the chat. It was Patricia, and she said, I live with type 1 diabetes and I seek help, must do so from my provider, but I never feel safe. Always judged and belittled, despite being a nurse and very knowledgeable, never accepted or included.
Talk about barriers to care. How can you feel safe? It's your own body. And thank you for sharing. I know you are not alone in your experience.
Yeah, I think anyone that lives with a chronic condition, the medical community can feel very harsh sometimes. It's a necessary evil, but I never walk away feeling good. I always feel like I didn't do enough despite 35 years of living with this, right? It's just, there's always something wrong. You don't ever do it right. So that you're always sort of left feeling not enough, right? And I never thought of being in the margin, but it resonated.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up like a book and then show you like the actual margin and then be like, this is what marginalized is. But I was like, let me just put it into a poem, and I just kind of went from there.
Nicely done. I liked it.
I want to add that it's interesting that until I found connections to holism in holistic nursing, I felt marginalized as a nurse for my belief system, as feeling that presence and caring was what led my care of others, as opposed to all that knowledge that I also had about how to take, how to empty a drain and how to put in a Foley and
Yes.
all of those things. So I think that I think that I want to acknowledge that as well, but also I want to say that your poem, I loved when you talked about the doodles in the margins, because it really shared that. It reminded us to honor our uniqueness, and that every creative part of your being is actually a gift to give to the world and to share with the world, even if we don't feel like people get it, even if they don't necessarily understand exactly what we're doing. So thank you for that.
Definitely, Marcy. And I was kind of trying to highlight my experience being a mental health. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner through the pandemic, seeing a lot of people that were receiving mental health services for the first time in their lives. And a lot of times they were telling me why they didn't, because one of the questions I ask is, have you ever received mental health services in the past? And when people would say, no, I haven't. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, why? Because no judgment, but it seems like you've been having some sort of issues with anxiety or depression for a long time, but something has been getting in the way of you receiving services. And this presentation today is kind of my reflection and investigation of that. But what I realized through my experience is, because they had never had an experience, I was able to try to shape that first experience. So it was like I was this blank space for them. And believe it or not, they were more likely to try my mindfulness and meditations before the session. They were more likely to try tarot card for psychotherapy, which is a new phenomenon that's happening. I hope to one day be part of the research team to use tarot in psychotherapy. There's evolving evidence on its use. But because they had never had an experience, they were more open than some seasoned patients that were like, yes, I've been in mental health for the past 30 years. I've been getting my refills. I've been doing this. It's like, okay, great. Well, can we just breathe together? Can we just take 5 seconds to just kind of calm that sympathetic activation, that heart rate, that breathing? And they'd be like, no, I don't want to try it. No, I don't want to, no. So there was kind of like trying to find some beauty in this chaos that was the past 2 years of mental health care delivery during the pandemic. As you see, I went on a full tangent, but I want to give a reference to what this presentation is kind of like, where I'm coming from. Anyone else have any reflections on where do I go for help?
Who's that?
Do I feel welcome?
Are you? Well, where are you? I'm not one to hear me.
If you aren't muted and aren't
It's a
talking, can
meeting?
you please mute, because we are recording and it will
Are
be
you in a
hard
meeting?
for people to
Then
hear.
watch the meeting.
No, because I'm not interested in the meeting. But I just
Q, I wanted to say that the image, your poem was wonderful. And one of the things that came to me is 2 things. One, about the blank spaces. And 2, that the margin is so obviously there. And so we're taught going to school to pay attention, that, we take our notes in the regular section, but that we use the margins for, I don't want to say the enrichedness, the daydreaming and all of that, but that margin is very much there on a paper. And I thought that was an excellent example. Miss Alyssa, can you mute? We want you here, but we can hear what's going on in your background. If you know how, you may have a phone and that may be a bit of a problem.
So without further ado, I'm gonna go on with the presentation. If you have anything that you want to speak about, you will have more opportunities later on to be compelled to speak. Thank you for the members that did speak and share their thoughts so far. I appreciate it. So next slide. So I was trying to figure out what was kind of preventing and kind of, this is my summary slide of what information I gathered from my patients. So this is anecdotal. This is not research-driven data with all the percentages and the demographics. And I apologize for that, but I think that in order to just have a conversation, we just need to put it out there and see how it connects with you or doesn't. It's a conversation corner. It's a little less formal than big data, right? We've had a lot of data.
Oh, was it?
That's his ways. That's his way of child
Margaret, are you
abuse.
able to mute everyone? I don't know how to do
I am looking at that.
I appreciate it.
Yes,
I don't know how to do it. Okay. So these are some things that I came across in my practice. Oh, by the way, I work at Urban Health Plan, which is a federally qualified healthcare center, which means that they have a designation by the federal government that they are in a lower income or treating marginalized communities that have difficulty with access to care. So this can either be very poor urban areas, or this can be rural areas where your nearest provider is 50 miles away. So, and it's part of the National Health Service Corps scholarship that I was a part of. So I'm kind of giving back, but I feel like I'm gonna stay there after I do my scholarship service because I love working there. And they don't have a problem with me yet. So we're gonna keep it good. So within this community in New York City, in the Bronx and Harlem, this is what I've kind of come up with some reasons why it's been difficult for some people to come into the clinic. So the first one, cultural barriers to receive mental health treatment due to contrasting views on etiology and origins of disease. So if we have different views on where the dysfunction is coming from, we may not be in agreement. We may not be in agreement with what the treatment may be. So I reflect on my time in Ethiopia with Columbia University. I did do a study abroad program in Ethiopia where I was helping with mental health services in the rural areas of Ethiopia. And over there in that community, many people believed that mental health concerns came from a demonic source or being possessed, or therefore the cure or the antidote or the treatment would be to go to a priest, to go to receive holy waters, to receive a purification ceremony. So therefore they're not going to show up to my mental health clinic and ask about psychotherapy or medication management, or if they just don't believe in medication management or psychotherapy, then so that was one thing that they indicated. Oh, I didn't come to services because this didn't really align with my own personal or cultural beliefs. And I believe that the source of the problem was not a medical concern, therefore I didn't go to medical services. Difficulty in allowing oneself to be vulnerable. Oh, this is so hard to sit here and say, and I say this proudly, I don't know everything. I don't have it figured out. I really am lost in this world and just trying to figure it out. And that's okay. In my culture, I'm from the Dominican Republic, but I grew up in urban New York City. It's like, oh, toughen up. Don't ever let them see you sweat. Don't ever let them see you cry. I was taught to kind of reserve my emotions and to kind of, that's for private matters, that's for in-home. So to come to a mental health practitioner and be vulnerable and talk about your triumphs and your failures, to talk about the difficult things in your life has been really challenging for some of my patients. And I've always believed that in vulnerability lies the true strength. We put up so many defenses and walls. I've got this figured out. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. But let's just get rid of that armor and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And that can be a beautiful thing. Concerns about medications. So there's a lot of, oh, my cousin was given this medication and they turned like this. And then, oh, I heard someone in the neighborhood do this. So I just didn't want that to happen to me. And that's okay. There's word of mouth. There's concerns about changes in personality with medications, duration of treatment. Do I have to be on meds forever? And is there any potential benefit in this? Why am I here talking about my problems for 45 minutes every week? What's the point of psychotherapy? What's the point of this meditation? And there was resistance, and there was resistance as even coming, but this is kind of trying to figure out some of these reasons why. And not everyone has to be on medications. Not everyone is a candidate for psychotherapy, and it's okay. But coming in, we start the dialogue, and that's where I'm at. Misdiagnosis with marginalized communities. I don't have the data on this, but I have done research on this in the past with African-American and minority populations having a higher frequency of bipolar and schizophrenia diagnosis from very early ages. So can you imagine being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old and given this diagnosis which holds a poor prognosis? Oh, you're going to be living with this for a long time, probably lifelong. You're going to be on medications forever. It really has its challenges when you might have just been misdiagnosed and then not really given a true chance. Are the symptoms different, or is it just the presentation of the client in the room that is different? Is there provider bias? Statistically, most providers have been Caucasian, and therefore their ability to connect with the populations they serve may have been difficult and or challenging, and there may have been misdiagnosis due to some perceived biases, provider biases. There's research on this, but I didn't want to put it on the slide because I just wanted to this be a talking point. But if your cousin got misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder and put on Depakote or lithium, and they were just kind of a walking zombie and drooling and had this strange personality that was like, I don't even know who my cousin is anymore after these medications, you wouldn't want to go for treatment yourself. And that's what a lot of my patients came up with, came to the clinic telling me. And then some ethnic communities may view mental health issues like depression or anxiety as problems to be overcome using faith, willpower, and mental toughness. I'm all about faith and willpower and mental toughness. That's wonderful, and how we cultivate, how we empower clients to reach in and to develop these as either coping strategies or place to build resilience. But it's not a place for judgment. Someone coming to you for help, they're coming to you in a bad place, in a difficult place. So kind of having some compassion there. Therefore, members in the community may erroneously perceive a person with mental illness as having weak will or faith or belief, or maybe potentially a danger to others. So even those people that do end up feeling like, hey, I have prayed, I have tried to have the will, I have tried to have the mental toughness to get through this, but it's just not happening, I need help, then they are not supported by their family or friends when they actually go outside of their traditional or cultural practices to seek help. They may be shunned from their community. And I don't know if anyone can kind of reflect on that, but it is something that's happening. Can we go back to the share screen and just if anyone has any thoughts or comments on what was discussed in this slide?
Hugh, one of the things that came to my mind is that, you know, basic to everything, to communication, to understanding, to having people be able to share those feelings, share their experiences, is trust. And no one, if they do not trust, if they do not feel safe and secure, they cannot tell you what is needed. And so they cannot tell you their deepest fears or things that they need from us, because we are that barrier, we are that margin that prevents them from being able to speak from the heart. It's hard enough to be vulnerable, but if you feel threatened and you don't feel safe, there's absolutely no chance that you're going to be able to share with your care provider. And Patricia is an expert, and here she is having that experience, and she is not got what some of the many of our marginalized or underserved populations are experiencing. She has, people would look at Patricia and say she's an expert, she's not going to have any problem with the system. And so if Patricia has those problems, then somebody else who doesn't have that expertise or comes from an underserved population that cannot be heard, is not even recognized, what chance do they have?
Hi, I want to step in here too and say thank you, Margaret. And the piece that's really resonating with me or up for me is part of what you were talking about in terms of the trust, which I thread back to Q, your statements about vulnerability and your sorry for the truck, willingness to role model that for us. For you to bring that personal poem forward so openly, really, it strikes me in so many different ways. So I'm just going to go for, as the presenter, what strikes me is your ability to and willingness to share yourself with us at that level. And as a practitioner, I feel that is part of what makes it possible to offer what Margaret's talking about in terms of the trust. If a practitioner is not being vulnerable with me, how am I going to feel trustworthy to be vulnerable with them? So I feel the practitioner has a strong responsibility to really sleuth, and I think we all have, if we're on this call, really look at ourselves with that perspective of how do I present my vulnerability? How do I allow myself to be vulnerable with me? And no, I don't know everything. So I just feel that is so important. And especially with marginalized, it's like, yes, I'm Caucasian. I claim that. I also have relationships with women. I also live in a mixed community with Hispanic family and a trans kid next door to me. I have different pieces, and the judgment that you were talking about, it's so important for me to recognize my own judgments, and that's part of my vulnerability, so that I don't bring them into the conversation or even into the room. So I deal with them, so they're not here. One of my neighbors came to me to work with him, and he said, I don't know who I can trust. He's Hispanic. And he's saying, I know I can trust you. I don't know if I can trust anyone else, you know. And so it really struck me, and that's kind of what's getting brought forward for me in this conversation. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Candace, we're gonna have a moment to speak after the next slide. Hold on to your thoughts. Thank you so much, Elaine. And we're gonna go to the next slide because I wanna get through everything in time, this 1 hour, this precious hour. And then we'll get right to you, Candace.
And Q, if you're willing to stay a few minutes over and people have it, we will certainly not kick you off unless I'm technologically incompetent. So just, know that I appreciate your time awareness, but you have the time you need, okay?
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And Elaine touched on that vulnerability. Just sharing this is like, I have not been able to talk to people about going through this as a provider. So this is kind of like really personal to me. So if I get emotional, just know it's just, I'm riding the feelings here, okay? Thank you, everyone. So we're gonna talk about barriers for marginalized communities. And even though this is not part of the stigma, I do think that it is part of the difficulty in seeking services. You're less likely to seek services if these barriers are in place. So while stigma tends to be more of a social construct, it's society kind of looking down on you for being potentially weak or vulnerable to the point of asking for help. This is more of a psychosocial, environmental barriers that are also, so if the stigma is not getting you to a place where you can't go for services, these barriers will make it even harder on top of the social kind of components. So lack of adequate health insurance and high costs. It still baffles me that it is less expensive for me to provide you medication that can probably kill you than for me to sit and talk to you for 30 minutes in psychotherapy. Psychotherapy has fewer side effects than almost any medication you will find. A meditation will have fewer side effects than most medication, but it is more expensive to provide these services because insurance companies are not covering. And as holistic practitioners, we know how difficult it is to get Reiki covered, acupressure, to get a lot of these other modalities covered by health insurance, and people just don't have the money to kind of make that happen. So you can't even with psychiatry, it's like they just want, they just want me to prescribe pills. They just don't feel that talking to patients takes too long, too many sessions to get the benefits that a pill would do. So it's a conundrum. Also limited, yes, we need to develop trust with another human being, even your provider. I'll get to your comment, Crystal, you're touching on great things, Crystal. Limited access to quality healthcare. So that's the other thing. Is there even mental health services around you that are of decent or good quality? Stigma that we talked about, mistrust. Trust came up several times in our conversation. In the healthcare system, I don't have to go into the Tuskegee studies. Everyone's kind of been aware of that. And if you haven't, you can always look into that later on. But there's been a general mistrust of the healthcare system. And that's even been heightened with the COVID pandemic and vaccines and mandates and things like that, which we're not going to get political here, but it's just about how difficult it is to get services, and is there an actual trust that the services provided are for me and or my people, and a limited awareness about mental illnesses. Therapeutic alliances built on trust. That is the foundation. I mean, just can't, it's really difficult to go anywhere from there, as Margaret was pointing out. Can you trust your provider with your trauma? It is baffling to me that I am expected to ask a patient that I'm meeting for the first time about their trauma history. I don't know if I've built the therapeutic alliance. But for billing's sake and for documentation's sake, I'm expected to do an initial psychiatric evaluation. First time meeting you. Hey, tell me about your trauma. I don't know. I think we can rethink the expectations of kind of getting that out there on the first go around, but to each his own. And then expressing your lived experience, feeling heard and understood. How difficult is it? Even with some of our best friends or family members, we may tell them about our problems, but do we feel heard? Do we feel understood? And then with our providers, language, lost in translation. How trustworthy are translation services in healthcare? I believe a quality assessment is needed. I am Hispanic, I speak Spanish. I am a bilingual provider with my patients, and even then, the complexities of language are really, there's a lot of complexity there between different countries, between dialects, and I will be the first person to ask my patients, even though I speak Spanish, hey, that's not really in my vocabulary. That's not a word I've heard before. Is there another way you can rephrase that on what's going on? But I have been in places where translation services have been provided, and I'm sitting there like, that is not the right word in Spanish. That's not, that's not the right phrase. Or they created a long paragraph. The doctor said a long paragraph, and then the translator just said one sentence. Hey, your liver is bad. But what about everything else that was said before that? So I think that translating services are just condensing to the minute essence of what the provider is saying or what the patient is saying and reverberating that to the client, but you're not getting the full picture. So I do believe in getting more providers out there that speak multiple languages. Even if you don't know every word, you can at least be able to have that exchange. Also, my patient preference, they've indicated that they've left practitioners just because they don't want to speak on a translator phone and tell their trauma history and their personal secrets and their personal things through a translator and then speak to you. It's like you're telling two people your story, and one of them you're not even seeing. They're not even in the room. That's really challenging for mental health services. Most would like to express their thoughts, feelings, and emotions in their own language. That is how I feel it. I feel it in Spanish, and I'm telling you in English. That's what Spanish was my first language, but I can't imagine if I was Chinese or if the patient was a different ethnicity. It's like, even while they're translating it in their head to tell you, they're feeling it in their language and telling you in the language at play, which in this case would be English. And I think that we need more providers that speak multiple languages to understand the words of their experience. Immigration and legal issues, people are less likely to seek services. I have heard it time and time again within my clinic that it was very scary to seek mental health treatment during the pandemic, feeling that you may be deported or you may be reported for coming in there for services, but not being documented, and that your whole livelihood, your work, your family could all be taken away from you because you needed assistance. You're asking for help. You are in your most vulnerable state, and you could be upended because of immigration and legal issues. I cannot imagine how scary this experience is, and I have had many patients recount that experience. This is now the sharing time. We had Candace that had her hand raised. I hope that she held on to that thought bubble.
There we go. I have 1,000 thoughts. I'll try and get it down to 4 maybe. I think the principle that will always set us in the right direction, whether we're in nurse role or friend role or parent role, whatever our life is just the concept, the strategy of accepting people where they are at. Accept people where they are at. Different than where I think they should be, how I think they should be, what I think they should say. All the what I think is not the point. It is accept people where they're at. That is what is the leap, then, the quick leap to trusting. Because your patient will know. They know that you accept them where they're at right away. By how you look, what you say, the tone, the whole thing, which, you know, you all know that. I hold on to that, and I use that as an affirmation every day. And that helps. It helps. Another point I like to bring up is just the concept, the term value. Who do we value? Not we personally, but as a nation, as a healthcare provider, as a system, as a government, all the ways we can chop things into portions. Who and what do we value? Well, let's be clear. We do not value children. We do not value older adults. We do not value mental illness because it's very difficult to get commitment, payment, progress, on and on down the list. So
do we value, I'm sorry, Candace, I'm just interrupting for a second. Do we value holistic treatment modalities? Insurance companies, do you value that? But
I know. I've been in holistic nursing since the 80s, so I'm with you there. And in our country, what we value is where the money goes. What we value is where the money goes. So at the bottom of all this is, in our country, money, which totally aggravates me. Totally, I'm fuming about that. And the last thing I wanted to say was that I've been a nurse almost 50 years now, retired the last couple of years, but I found after being a clinical nurse, teaching and working clinical and on, that going to people's homes as a visiting nurse, wherever that is, on the street, in their car, wherever their space is that they live in, changed everything. Everything. That concept of me going to them and needing to be invited in and invited to stay, different than please get out now. Whereas when a patient comes to you in your setting, in your clinic, in the hospital bed, wherever it is, it's totally on your terms, always. The unspoken message is, this is on healthcare's terms.
Oh, the power dynamic. And remember, when we talk about marginalized communities, it's the unequal power. What did I even write here? Unequal power relationships between social groups. How unequal is that power dynamic of patient, vulnerable, hurting, in pain, provider that is in their office, we perceive in a good stature of life, we have these perceptions as patient that we bring into the dynamic. They're always hurting, and we're presenting this image that we may not be hurting. Who knows? We may be hurting while we're in the session with them. Who knows? But that you're kind of tapping into a lot of things there. That unequal power dynamic between patient and provider.
I have this vision, and I'm sure it happens in some countries, but here's my vision, that in this country, every neighborhood, every street would have its own nurse. And when the baby's born, there's a nurse. When the child is ill, there's already a nurse. When the accident happens, there's already a nurse there. When the illness comes, or how to stay healthy, it's all based on a neighborhood nurse, and I think it would work. I really think it would work. I don't know about the money payment system. I'm not about that, but I think that would really change everything in terms of health and wellness and trust and being accepted, the whole, all of what we've talked about. And I'm so sorry, Q, I was late. I couldn't find the email because it was in my trash folder somehow. It went into all that. So I finally got on.
It's not the journey, it's the destination.
Candace, I want to say, and then I'm going to call on Chloe to be able to share. Have you looked into the Netherlands program? And what they did is they brought the nurses to the community. And initially the insurance companies did not like this, but they found that they love it because it's the nurse within the community and they contract with physicians when they need medical care. The rest of the time, it is nursing care. That's what we need here because when you're part of the community, you love each other as your neighbors, you love them as your mother and your daughter and your sister. So I really appreciate what you said, Candace. Chloe.
Hi. Yeah, so I really can resonate with a lot of what Candace had said. And I wrote down a few quotes, accepting people where they're at. I mean, that's just the basis of what healthcare should be. And I have a lot of thoughts as well and things that are coming up that I just get so jazzed about sharing, but I'll take a deep breath and select a few. As a personal side of things, as a patient who has dealt with OCD and other various issues in my life, I've had experiences where a psychiatrist, I just to be vulnerable, I am one of the people who I didn't feel like medication long-term was a path for me, but I was willing to try certain things for a period of time. But I just wanted to have a discussion about things. And this psychiatrist literally said, I don't care what you do, but like, do what you want or not. And it was not a conversation about really the path I wanted to take, but more just like, if I wasn't going to take the meds, then like she wanted nothing to do with me. And I was like, okay, well, I brought research to the conversation. It didn't matter. Anyway, so that's a personal perspective. But on the other side of things, in terms of being a provider, I left bedside nursing at the end of 2020 and started my own patient advocacy business. And so, Candace, when you were mentioning like a nurse in every community, as a patient advocate, my role is to, not only help with certain transitions of care, but help people like be an advocate for them when they're in the doctor's office, asking questions they may not have even known to ask, helping them find skilled nursing facilities or group homes, things like that, that they, essentially just take what is given to them by facilities or by physicians. They don't really ask questions, and maybe they don't know what to ask. You don't know what you don't know. So if they don't know how to ask or advocate for that possibility of a better place to reside or get care, then I get to help them out with that. And I see a lot of people are leaving, so I'm trying to wrap it up. The other thing I was going to say is that, it kind of also played towards the nurse in every community that you are talking about. The only problem being it is private pay, like what there are a lot of patient advocates who happen to be nurses. And that's kind of the struggle that I'm having right now, because my goal would be to help the people that truly can't help themselves. And it's just really hard to find a way to make that work in the system where, you could do pro bono, and it's just hard when you're also trying to, like, you have a family to support too, and trying to make a living with it. But anywho, lastly, I'll say this: working in the hospital bedside, I remember there was this patient who I happened to have time to help with their discharge. This patient was very clearly emotionally overwhelmed, was having trouble getting their words across, and they were just going to leave AMA. And I remember bringing them back in from the hallway. I sat down and I said, hey, just talk to me. Tell me about what you're stressed about. They were stressed about the fact that the doctor was telling them to take these certain meds. They're like, well, I'm out of those and I don't have a new prescription for them. I don't know who to go to for this. You know, when I was in here, people were trying to do procedures on me, and I've had trauma related to that. So you have nurses and staff walking in just doing these things without really being sympathetic to her direct trauma with those procedures. And it took 15 minutes to sit down and have a conversation with her. She didn't leave AMA, and I was able to get her exactly what she needed at discharge. And it was 15 minutes. Like, that was no time at all, you know. And I think people think that it's going to be an extensive amount of time to sit and really talk with these people. But if you ask direct questions, you're going to get direct answers. And, you know, so that was that. Thanks for listening. Sorry that took so long.
What resonated for me, Chloe, is your emphasis on intention. Your movements, your actions, and your word choices stemmed from intention, this intention to help, this intention to be there. And even though your encounter was brief, it was powerful. So don't forget the power of intention in what you're doing. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you.
Hugh, I'm going to try and do it in 30 seconds, but years ago, there was a comment made in the chat. Years ago, I was taught that we know that centering and that intention is critical, but the first intervention we have is how we introduce ourselves to our client. So when you walk into the room like your tail feathers are on fire, you race to the folio, you race to the computer chart, you race to the IV, instead of going gently and quietly, utilizing your presence and your energy to facilitate healing. The tail feathers, the IV tells the person it's the task that they're focusing on. The second says, I am here for you. And when you say, I'm here to make it a better day for you, my name is so-and-so, what would you like to be called? You are facilitating a sense of safety, you are facilitating a sense of control, and it's an incredibly powerful intervention. And so teaching students or colleagues or using it ourselves, that is, I've found that you can go from 0 to 100 on that trust just in that interaction. And so it's how we show up. And I would say that we always think it's about time, but how you use that time is critical. I think I used too much time, Q, so back at you.
Oh, I thoroughly appreciate that. We will go to the next slide, but right before we go to the next slide, I will say that I think of barriers as challenges, but I also think about them as opportunities. And with opportunities comes a moment of like, well, what are some solutions? How can we get rid of some of these stigmas? How can we reduce some of these barriers? And trying to make that palpable from a individual level, but also from a systemic, if you're running a whole hospital organization level. So I kind of try to find ways that you can do this in your own private settings, or if you had the power, if you're sitting with the big bosses at the table, which I am just like in awe that I'm sitting at the table with Margaret Erickson. I'm so sorry, just fan crushing here. But you know, it's just like, if you're able to sit there and make these changes happen, how would that look like? So I try to make these solutions from a microscopic to a macroscopic lens. So next slide. Is something happening to me? Where's the next slide? You are muted, Margaret.
I'm trying. Just a minute. I have it here and I'm trying to pull the darn thing up.
Okay, okay.
Is it up now?
I mean, I could just read it from my page if worst case scenario. You got this. You've been able to do this all this time. You got this. I believe in you.
Well, one of us should. Q, I'm seeing it, but you're not seeing it?
No, not right now.
Oh my gosh. It's right up here on my desktop, but it's not wanting to share.
Well, while you're sharing, I'll just start listing them off. It's happening. Yes. Bingo.
Go for it.
Okay. So increased mental health training. And that doesn't always have to be at the associate's level, bachelor's level, graduate, or beyond. There's mental health first aid that just helps. That's something that a program that we have in New York. I don't know if other cities have that, where it just helps family members and community members learn what it's like to be able to be empathetic and to listen and be there for people in their community in need. So there's mental health first training that can just happen for anyone that's an adult or beyond. And I even think that mental health first aid can be taught in high schools, where a lot of coping strategies and resilience building is very important. And how can you be there for other people and have people be there for you? Also encourage, invest in, and promote diversity and inclusion in workplace healthcare settings. Our healthcare work environments should be or can be just as diverse as the populations that we serve. So how can we make that happen? How can we make, because it does impact patients when they see providers that look like them or that may have had a similar experience than them, or even if it's just the receptionist, or even it's the nurse that's drawing the blood, or in whatever stratosphere, how can we diversify our workforce so that our patients can see the potential within themselves, within others? I'm a big component of this. Increase diversity among providers. Like I was saying, for a long time, a lot of the providers were, mental health providers were Caucasian. And as someone that went through my own mental health issues, I was like, wait a minute, not one person that has assessed me or talked to me in this clinic has either been similar or close to my race. And although they are caring, they are nurturing, they're doing all the right things, it's just, they were not there. So I said, I'm gonna be there because there wasn't that for me when I was needing help. So I don't know if that was a way to motivate me to get in there. Engage communities in sharing thoughts, feelings without judgment, holding a safe space. And that there's so many different ways to do this. There's sharing circles, there's event meetups, there's now for the social media age, although I do think that there's just something about being in the same room with someone or being in the same Zoom with someone and kind of feeling the energy amongst each other of the voice, of the physical characteristics, that's different than the actual just message. I'm old school. I want us to be connected. I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to feel you. And maybe we can feel through the written word, but I want that experiential thing. That's my thing. So I'm just saying, having safe spaces for feelings, thoughts and feelings without judgment, holding safe spaces, whether that is in church, whether that is sharing circles, whatever form that is. Empower people around you to maximize their potential. this has become so autobiographical, but I come from the hood. I'm from Washington Heights. I'm an immigrant into this country, and growing up, there were not many role models for me. And there were not a lot of expectations of what I could become or what I could do. And it was my mentors that were like, I know you just finished your bachelor's program, but I think you can go for that master's. Like, I'm telling you, Carla Mariano was my big mentor at Pacific College. She really got me together and she really pushed me. And so it's just, you need to find people that empower you. And it may seem delusional at first. You can do anything you want, limitless possibilities, the world is yours. And it's gonna be impossible until it is possible. It's gonna seem ridiculous until it's not ridiculous. So empower people around you, encourage people around you. It's really important. You don't understand what impact you're making on people around you, especially the younger generations. And the last one is praise new generation for their achievements. I also grew up in a church environment, so praise was like a double-edged sword because, oh, the sin of pride is kind of something to be looked down upon. But if somebody does something good, should you not just say, hey, good job there, buddy, keep it going? And what that impact that makes on the young generations is just timeless. If you accomplish something that was difficult and challenging, why not tell somebody, hey, that was wonderful what you did. That was wonderful what you said. Keep it going. We don't have enough praise for the young generation, I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion. And I think that we can push them. We have to push them. And praise is a great way to get their attention and get them, that was good, let's do more, let's do better, let's go. I just feel that that it's a really important part of evolution and change and reducing these margins that we spoke about. Now it's time to share because that was the last slide. Ta-da! And then that's just a reference about that marginalized communities, long COVID pandemic, if you want that reference for yourself.
And for those of you still with us, which is almost everybody, you will get more than one continuing competency hour. So I just wanted you to know that you will be credited with the time you spent with us. Up to you, Q, or back to you, Q. I don't know, up to you implies you're going to do something.
Yeah, they deserve the credit. They sat here listening to my voice all this time. Yes.
Patience with me for my technological incompetence. I learned something new again. So thank you for your patience. So comments or questions for Q?
I wanted to make a comment. This is Michelle Fortney. I just wanted to say it's so nice to see you, Margaret. So many years ago, you sat on the phone with me and I said, I don't know if I'm prepared to take this test. And you said, well, tell me about your life. And I did. And you said, you're ready to sit for this test. Go ahead. So thank you. So beautiful to see your face.
Thank you, Michelle. I think that, you know, I really appreciate the wonderful words. And one of the things we try to do is walk the talk. And I think one of the things that Q has talked about tonight, and our last one was Dominique Fontaine, who talked about neurodiversity, is we all come at life with different strengths, different abilities, but we're all here to serve. And one of the things, Q, you talked about the misdiagnosis really rang with me, and I forgot it until this last great reference about ACE. And what they said is that one of the major problems associated with trauma is that it results in misdiagnosis of mental health problems. And so instead of listening and connecting and understanding the person's lived experience, what we do is we medicate. or in some godforsaken states, we do electroshock therapy, or things that do the exact opposite of what we need. So I think that we all are here to serve, and I think that your experiences, Q, that you shared with us, bring little pieces. It's like those little puzzle pieces that we know we've got this huge puzzle we're trying to put together, but help us better understand somebody else's experience. And I appreciate the kind words in the chat. And I'm going to go back and say, does anybody else have something they would like to share?
Well, what I really wanted to share after acknowledging you, Margaret, was there's a beautiful book called Margin. And I heard the presentation of the physician who wrote the book. And I just wanted to reframe margin for a minute, because it's an opportunity. Someone earlier said, you know, we are in that margin, right? We're in that space, but that space is there intentionally, and it's for this, it's in service to integration. So those who are marginalized, or those who, you know, who are on the sidelines, in the margin, rooting for the other, we are the space from which the healing occurs. We are the medicine, and we have the opportunity to use that place, both as the person sitting there and as the one who's been left out, and the one who has been a minority, and the one who's had different values. That is a space of integrating a great learning. And when we're pushed into that space, or we feel like we're inhabiting that space one way or another, to look for the gift in it is to just add thrusters to our presence and to our impact in the world. So margin, if we're going to polarize it, I want to acknowledge the other side of margin.
I think I would just add, you know, it's the discussion that starts the change. And so healthcare is a complex universe of all different levels, from the macro to the micro. And, you know, we all sit in different spaces in that. And thank you, Margaret, for bringing us together to have that conversation that we can take back to wherever we live, wherever we work, to keep it going. And thanks, Quilvio, for an awesome presentation. And I hope if you feel called to it, maybe you would share the poem with all of us that are here on the call, so that we can, you know, sit with
I
it further.
feel like I would share the whole presentation. I mean,
awesome.
I am just glad that you came, and that, because you're spreading this. This is the start, and then you're spreading this, exactly. and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity.
Q, we bow to you. It has been recorded, and it will be available on the website so that you can access the information. Before we close, we will be sending out a certificate this week for 1.5 continuing competency hours for your participation. If there is something that you want to share, if there's a worldview or an experience that's important that you think will help us add to our puzzle, a puzzle piece that helps us become more aware, more informed, because how can we be holistic nurses if we aren't? Please contact us, because we look forward to hearing from our colleagues or our colleagues' friends or family as we move forward. And we're having, Q, I don't know if you're able to see the chat, but we're having some wonderful feedback. And again, I want to say, is there anybody else that has anything that wants to share, or comments that you'd like to make?
I feel compelled to ask Ellen Ledoux if she has any comment, as she was pulled away at this moment.
She's back.
Ellen?
I see her smiling.
Yes.
I guess I feel called upon and I'm thinking, am I in the margin with that? But I think that the presentation was very good and it gives me pause to think, you know, about life and my part in it. Thank you.
Ellen, I think that's really very simply stated and very profound, because we all know that we cannot learn and grow without reflection, and reflection only occurs with a pause. So thank you. Hugh, is there anybody else you feel called upon? You're feeling compelled, and I watch people sometimes, so I get this.
Crystal provided so much on the chat, and I don't know if she's been able to speak. Crystal put a voice to those posts.
Hi, I'm Crystal. And I just want to say I'm so very grateful for this Holistic Nursing Association and this space, this hour, and this presentation. I was one of just a few Hispanic students in my nursing cohort, and I had experienced some trouble with some professors and didn't have a lot of support. The one thing I did find was a minority support group on campus that was for all of the students from all of the schools at UCSF. And one of the things that the therapist who led the group said, I know you're having a difficult time right now, but I guarantee you it will be worth it when you graduate. And he was so right. And now that I have found this community of holistic nursing, you know, I am so happy I persevered and went through. One of those supports for me was the Hispanic Nurses Association, for which without I would probably not have made it through my nursing program. But just having someone who looked like me to help support me and just say, yes, you can do it, even if it takes you longer, even if you drop out for one moment, but just come back to it. That was really helpful. And I think having those types of communities and support for our nurses and for our patients is super helpful and super important. And just having people who can meet you where you are in the moment and just accept you. That has definitely been a skill that for me in my practice as a diabetes nurse has been what has kept patients coming and having change over a long period of time, not just the 15 minutes with their primary care provider, but having an hour long to have a discussion where we can learn. The first thing I ask is like, tell me about your life, tell me about your day. And maybe we don't get to diabetes or insulin that day, but they schedule an appointment for a next time, which for me is always a good sign. So yeah, I'm just very grateful for the opportunity to be here and to share, and happy to connect with anybody on anything.
Crystal, I'm going to share with something with everybody that's still on, because you will be getting a newsletter eventually. But one of the things that the EEDI group has done is they've created a fellowship that we are offering. I don't know if you've heard about it, but we are offering to individuals within the nursing diversity groups. And we're very excited because our two first fellowships are going to the National Hispanic Nurses Association. We don't pick the people, the organizations do. And the fellowship actually is a 2-year program, and AHNCC has decided to partner with us. They are partners. And the fellows will have a mentor that will help them through the certification process. We are offering the application, the test fee, the reset fee, the practice fee free of charge. The AHNCC is offering the foundations course as well as some webinars. And we're really excited about this because we know that if we're going to care for all people, we have to have more diversity. And, you know, Quilvio's statement about feeling something in his language, his native language, and expressing it something else was very profound to me, because we don't all have the same words. We don't all use the same language. So we are the EEDI committee that is overseeing this. And at the end of the year, it's a fellowship versus scholarship because there's no payback and we didn't want IRS to be involved. At the end, they get a certificate of completion that can go in their CV. So you will hear about that officially. That is one of the initiatives that AHNCC has taken through the EEDI committee. Conversation Corners is another one. But our goal is to really help take off our blinders, expand our worldview so we can better serve. So thank you for sharing your story. I am in awe of all of you for coming tonight. Q, anybody else that gets your magic wand?
I was just gonna have James Welch take it away. He is the co-chair of EEDISJ, our little committee that we try to make little changes turn into bigger changes. And he can lead us off with a final reflection and we can wrap it up, Margaret, if that's okay.
Quilvio, what can I say? I'm always in awe when you present something because it is, yes, it makes us reflect and think back. It always brings tears because each of us at some point has been marginalized. Women are marginalized in our society. Persons of color, persons who are immigrants, persons of various orientations are marginalized, and we each have a story to tell. And I appreciate and thank you for being willing to make yourself vulnerable out there and share your story with us. Love you,
everyone. Thank you. Have a beautiful night, everyone, and spread love and praise and encouragement to everyone.
Namaste.
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 Sleep well, everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.